Okay, I welcome you now to the first unit or lecture number 1 of labor economics. What is it that we are going to discuss? We'll have time to define what labor economics is and basically look at the factors that determine the size and composition of labor force. Okay, then we'll have time to look at the importance of labor economics and the scope of labor, economics, just that. And finally, we'll look at the nature of labor problems in developing economies. So what is labor? The definition of labor economics and the factors that determine the size and composition of labor force, the importance of the same labor economics and the scope thereof, and actually just going to look at. So now, so you see, labor economics is actually one of the most important pieces of study that you need. Okay, so labor economics actually is defined as the study of workings and outcome of the market for labor, right? The study of the workings and outcome of the market for labor. So what it is mainly concerned with is the behavior of employers and employees in response to the wages, the prices, the profits and working conditions. So that is what we are interested in. So in labor economics, we study the behavior of the employers and employees as they respond to the wages, the prices, the profits and working conditions. So therefore, in labor economics, we study the relationship between the wages and employment opportunities. We study the interaction among wages, income and decisions to work. Yeah, we study that interaction, and we also study the way wages, prices, and profits affect occupational choices. How do these, dictate what occupation choice we have to go for? Incentives for and effects of education and training investments is what we look at. And the effect of those unions on wage, the productivity and turnover, the labor unions. And some of the effects, of for the social policies such as the minimum wage, labor legislation, and safety and health regulations, and wage and employment. Okay, we now define for ourselves what labor market is. Basically the mechanism, a well-arranged mechanism that brings together, for transaction, the employers and employees so that they can interact with each other. So that's basically what that means. So labor market equilibrium is a situation, it refers to the situation where we have the labor force, the labor that has been supplied by those people looking for employment, and the labor that is being demanded, of course, by the firms, those that want to hire, those are employers. They are equal, right? And then there is this wage that brings these numbers into equilibrium. So this is the quantities or the number of the labor that is being demanded. This is what we call labor equilibrium. So we'll have a conversation that is a bit deeper on this one as we just move on. So now we have defined what labor is, okay, which is very important. It was important for us to just define what labor is. And after we have defined what labor is, then it is just important to us to have time now to look at some of the key factors actually that do affect or that determines the size and composition of the labor force. The labor force is actually determined by the population size. Okay, number one. So that is to say, who is part of the population? Okay. Usually this relationship depends on the birth rate, the death rate, and the net immigration. So it's basically dependent on at what rate are people giving birth, at what rate are people dying, and how many people, are coming into the country, less those that are going out of the country of that force. So that is what happens. Then there could be other demographic issues that affect the population. That could include the following: age composition. Mainly the people that work, the age population that is regarded as, a working age is between 15 years and 64 years. Below 15 years, then they are not working. And above 64 years, these are old people that are already off, they are out of the labor force as well. So that's why we say that age is also a factor that determines that. The sex composition of the population is also one of the determinants. So what you find here is that in an economy where the population actually tilts favor any particular sex, for example, men being favored more than the females, then we have a problem here. So you will see that there are some economies that favor certain sex. Now, the other factor that affects the composition and the size of the labor force is the labor force participation rate of the population. Now, by participation rate, we mean the percentage of the working age population which is actually working or not working, but are actively looking for work. Now, that is what we mean the participation rate. So it is actually determined by compiling the actual potential labor force, what is called the age eligible population. So when you say labor force participation rate, we want to get the people who are employed. Let me say the labor force participation rate. Get this one: labor force participation rate is equal to the unemployed people plus those who are employed divided by the working age. The working age, okay? The working age, by working age, I mean 15 to 64 in this range. So how many people are in this and how many of these are employed plus how many of these are unemployed? And by being unemployed, we mean these people are actively seeking a job. If they're not seeking a job, then you can't say they are unemployed. Times 100. So this is what we mean. This is how we work out the labor force participation rate. So it is what determines that. So you find that other people are not participating in the labor force. Okay. And then if they are not participating in the labor force, such as maybe the students, the inmates, those people may not be part of the labor force, despite being in the working age. Okay. Now, the potential labor force is actually the entire population, the total population. What is the potential labor force? The potential labor force is like those people who could actually be in the labor force. The potential labor force it includes It is actually made up of the entire population, the total population less the people who are underage, that is below 15 years old, plus those who are, above 65, above 60, 64, 65 and above. Those people are excluded. So we exclude, number one, the number of people under 15 years of age and the people who are institutionalized, and those people actually who are above 64. Those people are not part of the labor force. So we remove those people from the labor force, then you remain with the potential labor force. It's basically that. That's what is known as the potential labor force. Now, what is the actual labor force? So the actual labor force consists of those people who are either employed or unemployed. Unemployed plus employed equals to the actual labor force. Okay, so that is how you find the labor force. So given a question where you need to calculate and show us the actual labor force, so people who are participating in the labor force, it's just the sum of the unemployed people plus those who are employed. Okay, so that is what happens. Now we are continuing looking at the factors that actually determines those factors that determine the size of the labor force. Number 3 is the average number of hours worked weekly and the annual. So you see that the labor force here is excluding the total amount of labor supplied in the economy. Okay. So what happens is that, or by this we mean that the labor force minus the total amount of labor supplied in the economy does not actually depend on the number of the labor force that participates, but it also depends on the average number of hours that they work per week and per year by those that actually participate in the labor force. So, for example, in the case of Zambia, we go for the 8-hour, the 8-hour per day. That's 40 hours a week, right? Go for the 40 hours a week. That is to say, you work 8 hours every day, from Monday to Friday, and then you multiply that, 8 hours times 5 days, giving you 40. So we are working on a 40 hours a week. Yeah. So that is what affects that as well. So you will see that because of the same, the experience will show that the work week will decline on a weekly basis. Yeah, that is to say the worker's income, that's the worker's income, the leisure preferences that people have. For the non-wage income, then it will be, if non-wage income increases, then the number of working hours will reduce. And again, the assumption here is that leisure is a normal good. What about the other factor that affects, the labor force size and composition? It is the people's attitude towards work. Yeah. So what you see is that the general attitude of people in a particular society will affect the size of the labor force. So in some countries where those who belong to the labor force do not actually depend on the unemployment effort or maybe any form of it, such as the social allowances, those social benefits in other countries, they're given unemployment benefits, right? When you're not employed, you get some allowances. That's what we mean by social or unemployment benefits. So the size of the labor force would actually be large, okay? It would be large in that case. But what is happening is that in a situation, okay, In such a situation, people will be willing to provide labor services for their upkeep. That is, if we exclude those, social transfers, those benefits. But some people, they will not actively look for jobs because they know that they will receive some benefits, some allowances from being unemployed. So that is what affects that again. Then we can also look at the quality of labor as well, being one of the factors affecting the composition and the size of labor force. So a qualitative or maybe superior labor force is one that is actually more experienced, number one, is more educated, and actually better trained. So productivity of labor may be considering an investment in human capital. And the human capital investment would include the expenditure on, let me say, formal education, on the job training and health, and the migration of the same labor force. So you find that the quality of labor is actually very, very important here. So now, the other factor that would affect the same is the legal requirements, on women participating in the labor force, okay? Some countries, maybe as a result of some religious influence, women are excluded from the labor force here. For that reason, the size of the labor force is in such a country will be limited to the number of men who are willing to work. If that happens, you see that things get a bit tough. Is labor important? Is labor economics important to the economy? The study of labor economics is very important. Why is it important? Labor economics helps us to understand labor-related problems such as the issues on fair wage, the salaries, workers, welfare of workers, labor productivity, workers' safety, gender-related matters, job security, and job satisfaction. So without labor economics, we may not be able to understand these issues, okay, such as what could be the fair wage to give the people? What could be what should we do about the welfare of workers and the productivity of these same workers, the work safety, and some gender-related issues, job security and job satisfaction concepts. All these issues are covered in labor economics. So that's why labor economics is very important. Labor economics is important because, it provides the data for economic planning and policy, such as the policy on the contribution of labor services to people income, the contribution of labor services to people. Evidence that in most economy, labor input is the most of economic resources. Now, it also helps you to understand the nature of the market in which labor services are brought and sold. Okay. So now, what is the general scope of labor economics? Okay. It is concerned, of course, with issues that affect or that are concerned the labor force. Yeah, a lot of those issues are actually covered in there. You would find that even the concept of migration is covered there. You'd learn that some characteristics are there to influence migrants. For example, the age. If the person maybe is single, okay, many people who are between the age of 20 to 24 are most likely to, to migrate across countries. Actually, by the time they reach the age of 32, then the rate of migration begins to drop gradually, and by 42, it drops very low. So migration is usually for young people, especially across countries. So migration is greater among the young with great potentials and ability to take high risk. But that is what happens. And again, education also affects migration. That is to say, uh, you know, most likely the educated people are most likely to cover long distances, migrating, moving to and fro because they are in search of the greener pastures. Okay. So basically, those are some of the following things that we discuss under, labor economics. Now, what are some of the most serious problems that are faced by the developing economies? In the developing economies are always in shortage of labor because many developing countries lack skilled labor. The reasons are because majority of the population are not skilled actually, or maybe they are semi-skilled labor. For that reason, they use expertise in production that need high-level skilled manpower. So they use foreigners. That's one of the challenges that these people face. These economies, they face a challenge in such a way that most people who are working, they receive low wage payments, which are common among employees who have no skill or are semi-skilled. That is those who have little or no education. So labor is abundant for agriculture, while there is less labor for industries, commerce, and services. That's what usually happens in developing countries. And usually the government is the chief employer of labor during that time. So you see that problem. Then the other challenge that is faced by the developing economies is that labor force problem is a characteristic of many self-employed, artisans who are not organized or have anything to do with government, government institutions or organized private sectors. So those are some of the challenges that are faced by the developing economies. Okay. So this time around, I call for any questions if at all there are any questions. At your own time, you should have time to do this work. Please do this work very soon and submit your solutions here. I'll briefly explain and discuss how economic theory helps us to understand labor as a factor of production. You should have time to go through that based on some concepts that we have just generally covered.